This is CBN NewsWatch.
Thanks for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Wendy Griffith. Bernie Sanders came out on top after voters in New Hampshire took to the polls yesterday in the nation's first primary election. Coming in a close second and third was Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar. The Democrats are a party deeply divided. What can bring them together? Charlene Aaron has more.
In a contest where most Democratic voters said they're looking for someone who can beat Donald Trump, Bernie Sanders took the top slot. That as Trump won the GOP primary with more votes than any incumbent president in history.
This victory here is the beginning of the end for Donald Trump.
But Pete Buttigieg's strong second-place showing makes him the clear alternative to moderates who see Sanders' socialist policies as too extreme.
A campaign that some said shouldn't be here at all has shown that we are here to stay.
Buttigieg and Sanders split the New Hampshire delegates, giving Buttigieg a slight lead after his Iowa victory. Senator Amy Klobuchar, another moderate influence, took a surprising strong third-place finish, getting a big boost from her debate performance last week.
What we've been is steady, we've been strong, and we've never quit. I think that sounds pretty good for a president. But across the months and months and miles of this race, we redefined the word grit.
Former Vice President Joe Biden and Senator Elizabeth Warren, once frontrunners, both finished with single-digit support. Biden left the state early to get to South Carolina, where he hopes for a big win among black voters to keep him in the race.
Where I come from, that's the opening bell, not the closing bell.
Andrew Yang and Senator Michael Bennet have dropped out of the race. After spending some $200 million on TV ads, Michael Bloomberg is gaining ground in national polls, but he's not on the ballot until Super Tuesday. He's facing new criticism after a recording from 2015 surfaced in which he defends his controversial stop-and-frisk policy in minority communities as New York mayor. Bloomberg apologized for the policy months ago, just days before launching his presidential campaign. The political spotlight quickly shifts to Nevada, where Democrats will hold caucuses on February 22nd. But the candidates will be barnstorming several states in the days leading up to Super Tuesday on March 3rd. Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
Thank you, Charlene. And for more political news and analysis, be sure to catch Faith Nation this evening, and you can watch it right here on the CBN News Channel. Pro-lifers in New Mexico fight back against a new abortion bill. State Democrats are planning to reintroduce a new version of last year's House bill, which would allow abortion up to birth. The bill removes conscious protections for healthcare professionals who believe abortion is wrong and gives physicians who are not licensed the right to perform abortions. Evangelists, lawmakers, and others will gather Friday at the New Mexico State Capitol for Pro-Life Lobby Day. Reverend Richard Mansfield with New Beginnings Church in Albuquerque told CBN News, quote, "We will fight to have every abortion clinic in this city and this state closed by the end of the year. We're going to say it does not exist here anymore. In fact, we're going to say it doesn't exist anymore in the United States. God will forgive and restore." Well, as the coronavirus continues, more cruise ship passengers are being quarantined on board after 5 countries barred the MS Westerdam cruise liner from docking as a precaution. The ship will disembark its passengers in Cambodia. Passengers will be subject to health checks on arrival. Meanwhile, a British couple quarantined on a cruise ship in Japan says life on board is getting harder.
The conditions are very good. They're looking after us very well, but obviously we are confined to our cabin, and it's getting harder. You know, we're now into the second week. It seems an eternity.
It's getting people's moods down. One of the passengers in the night were keeping other passengers awake, an old lady who was crying for a couple of hours in her cabin. You know, so yeah, life isn't as easy as it was last week. It's a bit more challenging.
That's tough. Well, the Diamond Princess cruise ship the couple is on has a total of 174 confirmed cases of the virus on board. Best to stay in their room. Well, the UN's Human Rights Council is at the center of controversy. The reason: it published a list of more than 100 companies it says have raised serious human rights concerns because they are operating in Israeli settlement communities. This list targets both Israeli and international businesses working in Judea and Samaria, Eastern Jerusalem, and the Golan Heights, all areas the UN believes belong to the Palestinians. Critics say the UN is promoting the anti-Semitic BDS movement by blacklisting companies that serve both sides. Well, in Syria, American troops opened fire in a village. That's according to Syrian state media. They say the troops fired shots at locals who tried to block a U.S. convoy as it drove through a checkpoint in the village. Locals allegedly threw stones at the troops and took down an American flag from one of the vehicles. Troops retaliated, firing live ammunition and smoke bombs. Syrian media reports one civilian was killed. Hundreds of U.S. troops are stationed in northeastern Syria, working with the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces to fight against ISIS. Pope Francis is calling on Christians to pray for those in Syria and China. During his weekly audience today, Francis demanded prayers for Syrian children and families living in a country which he said, quote, has been bleeding for years. The Pope also used his time to urge Christians to pray for Chinese people suffering with the deadly coronavirus. Closing his eyes in a silent prayer, the Pope wished them to find healing as soon as possible. Amen. Well, one of the world's oldest and most destructive insects is wreaking havoc in Africa. Hundreds of millions of locusts are eating their way across the continent, putting crops, food security, and millions of lives at risk. Our George Thomas brings us the latest from Zambia.
It's almost like a page out of Exodus, the worst outbreak in decades, as billions of desert locusts swarm across a large part of Africa.
Today, locust swarms are as big as major cities, and this is getting worse by the day.
Experts say the average swarm can contain up to 150 million locusts, travel 100 miles in a single day, and grow as large as 250 football fields.
That swarm in one day can eat the same amount of food as the entire population of Kenya. That swarm in one day can eat the same amount of food as everybody here in the tri-state area, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and New York.
Desperate farmers in rural eastern Kenya are using blankets and other clothing or beating on pots and pans to chase away the hungry pests. But it's doing very little to stop them from devouring crops. And now the UN is warning the fast-breeding insects could grow 500 times between now and June.
I'm seeing a big catastrophe ahead and a very big food security concern if we don't address this problem.
Caught in the path, some 19 million people who already deal with severe food shortages now face another looming catastrophe. The United Nations sending urgent appeals while infected countries deploy thousands of troops and use planes to spray pesticides against the destructive bugs.
It gives you a sense of the scale of the crisis we are facing, and we need to address it immediately.
Today, the countries of Sudan, Eritrea, Somalia, Ethiopia, and Kenya are facing what experts say is the worst locust infestation in nearly 70 years. But for local farmers further south in countries like here in Zambia, they're facing another crisis, and it's a crisis of a lack of water. 2 years of little to no rain and failed harvests have forced 28-year-old Concepta Hamalombo to abandon her cornfields again this year. She's among some 2 million in this country facing food insecurity.
I didn't harvest any crops last year or this year due to the drought, which forced me to look for work elsewhere. I've been going door to door asking people in my village for work just so I can buy some food.
World Vision, the Christian aid group, is distributing maize meal, drought-resistant maize seed, and cowpeas to families hardest hit by the drought here.
There's not enough water to generate electricity, so businesses and companies have 15 hours, 16 hours of no electricity a day. That also has an impact on people being able to earn money. That has an impact on being able to buy food.
While locusts haven't hit Zambia yet, farmers here worry the massive swarm sweeping across much of East Africa could fly further south, bringing destruction to a region already reeling from extreme weather. George Thomas, CBN News, Southern Province, Zambia.
Wow, thanks, George. Coming up, we hear from one woman about the living conditions for immigrants at the U.S.-Mexico border. But before we go to the break, here's a look at what's trending on CBNNews.com.
Sex before you marry is a bad idea.
Don't tell me there's no such thing as gun violence.
That just depends on your definition of when life begins.
Watch Dan and Dale tackle trending topics that test your faith on the next Faithwire, Monday night at 9:30. The Global Lane takes you around the world, providing facts over fiction.
What might rising trade and geopolitical tensions mean for you on the home front?
With over 45 years of experience, award-winning journalist Gary Lane brings you the truth from a global angle.
What about the issue of immigration?
World news analysis you won't see anywhere else.
And it's all right here on the Global Lane.
Watch The Global Lane, Thursday night at 9:30.
Along the U.S.-Mexico border, thousands of families from Central America are waiting on the Mexico side for U.S. asylum hearings. This all started last summer when a new Trump administration policy known as Remain in Mexico mandated that they wait for court dates on the Mexico side. Their living conditions there are unstable at best and life-threatening at worst. The humanitarian agency Bethany Christian Services is just one group that's concerned. CBN's Heather Sells spoke with Christy Gleason, the vice president of global programs at Bethany, who recently visited the Mexico side of the border.
The conditions there were dire. Families are needing food and water and heaters. It was really, really cold when we were there. And so it was really concerning to know that there were families out there living without access to water, access to sanitary facilities, access to food is even becoming an issue.
Are there any kinds of resources for these families, anything for them to tap into, or are they having to pretty much find everything on their own?
So there are the beginnings of some grassroots levels of responses. I know that there's also larger organizations, international organizations that are coming in that have been providing some of those services, but it's a lot of families, and so the need is overwhelming. And there's limited resources on the Mexican side, as we know. And so I think there's a lot of people that are coming together, churches and organizations on the U.S. side that are helping to support organizations on the Mexican side. But more help is definitely needed.
And how is Bethany strategizing in regards to how Bethany might get involved here?
Right now, what we're doing is some very quick responses, including working to help support some of the teachers that are down there living in the shelters as a family member is waiting for asylum. They're also trying to help educate the children. They have no supplies, they've got no curriculum, so we're going to send down a couple teachers to help train and support and to bring down some supplies. We'll also be providing trauma training to some of the workers working right there on the front line, some of the social workers and response workers. And then we're looking at what's the bigger picture. We are looking to potentially replicate a program that we have on the border of Colombia and Venezuela, where we serve children and families coming across with things like water and food, a safe place to rest, some educational opportunities and learning opportunities for kids, but also a lot of mental health and psychosocial support, psychological first aid, things like that.
Christy, you were talking about the bigger picture. When you think about these families waiting on the Mexico side and this upcoming year, what do you see happening? Do you think many will get their court dates and receive asylum, or will they return home? And how long might they be there? And might we see a lot more families coming? What is your anticipation as you think about how you can help?
It's a great question. I think there's a lot of unknowns right now. So we're seeing a lot of families not win their asylum cases. And so they're waiting in limbo for either another court date or an appeal, or to decide what to do next as they realize that their dream of coming to the U.S. is not going to happen in the way or in the timing in which that they thought it was going to happen. And so I'm concerned to think about the fact that more families continue to come. The need is still there. These are families that are fleeing for their lives, families that feel like they cannot stay in their countries of origin due to safety factors. We talked to many families who said our lives were in danger and we picked up what we could carry and we came up because we wanted safety for our children, safety for our family. So there's a lot of concern right now about the uncertainties about where families are going to go if they realize and when they realize that they're not going to be able to come into the U.S.
All right, and we know that typically a lot of families also come when the weather gets better, so there's that to anticipate as well. But a lot to think about. Christy Gleason with Bethany Christian Services, thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me.
He's making a splash in Hollywood at just 19. Filmmaker Matty Rich traded films for gaming. See how he's now returning to the silver screen with a unique partnership and a bolder Christian faith. We'll have that interview right after this.
On the home front. Thanks for joining us for CBN's On the Home Front, where we highlight what the men and women of America's military do to defend our country. CBN honors the men and women in our military with an initiative called Helping the Home Front. It partners with churches across the country to meet the needs of their military families, from repairing homes to wiping out medical bills for wounded veterans.
On the Home Front, Tuesday morning at 10:30.
If you want to be an attorney with a passion for serving people and for excellence, Regent University needs to be high on your list.
Regent's award-winning law school doesn't just create lawyers. We create leaders, judges, prosecutors and defense lawyers, civil litigators, and leaders in government.
My focus has been trying to really make sure we have the future leaders we need for the bench and the bar and for society generally.
You'll learn from highly credentialed leaders who are current and former judges, distinguished scholars, and ACLJ counsel.
I'm so glad I chose Regent. The relationships here have been amazing. The faculty have been amazing. Not everybody's called to the same thing when they leave law school, but they're called by a God who has a purpose for their lives, and He is going to use that education to make a difference in the world.
Regent will prepare you to be a purpose-driven, practice-ready lawyer. To start your rewarding law career, complete the online application, submit your transcripts, and take the law school admissions test by July. Apply today.
Fueled by his faith, filmmaker Matty Rich made a splash in Hollywood at just 19 years old. And after a more than 25-year break from movie making, he's back in a big way. He sits down in our Studio 5 with a look back and a look ahead.
We begin this movie maker's story here in Brooklyn, New York, where a young Matty Rich began making a name for himself in the early 90s with a film pulled from the pages of life around him.
You entered the filmmaking world at what age?
19.
19?
Yes, sir.
And for people who don't know, what film was that?
My first film was called Straight Outta Brooklyn.
Woo, look at that fly car, man! Everybody out there's getting paid but us. But I'm gonna change this. I'm gonna change it.
Daniel, what you gonna do? You gonna go out there and you're gonna do something stupid?
And I was the winner of the Sundance Film Festival at 19. When I was 21, I directed a movie called The Inkwell, with a lot of people would know about that movie, with starred Jada Pinkett Smith, Lawrence Tate, a lot of other great stars.
Oh, I'd almost forgot what a great place this was. How long has it been? 5 years?
Mm-hmm. And it's your own fault, Brenda. You wouldn't even be here now if your house hadn't almost burned down.
Come on, girl.
I was the young flavor of the month in Hollywood. And I was blessed to have that opportunity.
At 19 and 21 to be making movies, where'd that come from?
God. People always ask me, how did you do it? How did someone that young have the capacity, the mental capacity? It truly was my upbringing, my family, my mom. My mother listened to me when I said I wanted to do this. At a teenage year, that she decided to give me her credit card, and so did my sister. And even though I may not have paid them back, they took the risk on me. They got their money back, but they took the risk. But that's like the foundation of kind of how I was raised. There's no one who can tell me that I can't do anything. If God gave me this gift, it's for me to share it to the world.
I can do all things.
Christ, who strengthens me.
More than 20 years after his last film, Matty Rich is making a splash of headlines in Hollywood again. Now directing a thriller starring rapper T.I. It's titled Caller 100. And there's yet another passion project still in the works.
It's called Cure, C-U-R-E, and it's the story of this African-American boy who was born with miraculous healing powers. Powers came from Christ. And I shot like a 10-minute teaser of this. And I wrote, directed, produced it, and also played the role of this father. I casted this kid. And I screened this at AFI, and the audience loved it.
How did you come to this particular story in terms of this being your third?
Well, I tell you that this story came to me sitting on an airplane, I kid you not, going from Paris to Hong Kong. And my mom would give me this Bible. And while I was on this plane by myself, going from one country to the next, I started thinking, what if there was this African-American boy who possessed a power that can heal everything that ails us as human beings? And he was given this gift by Christ. You wouldn't think that a young African-American kid who was grown up in a poverty-stricken neighborhood would have that kind of gift, because some people would overlook and think that they're this way or that way or whatever that prejudice may be. But what if your gift was living in a place that you would never go to? That's where it all came from.
In terms of your story and your faith story, you've been here at the Movie Guide Awards several years.
Yes.
Obviously a man of faith. Where'd you come to it?
Well, it all started from my granddad, who was a deacon in Harlem. And he was one of those granddads that, like, if you didn't go to church on Sunday, he would, like, drag you to church. You know, he made you go. And with his love, you know, is when I literally fell in love with Christ, is through my granddad and seeing him, you know, love Christ. And he was the one, when I was doing Straight Outta Brooklyn, he was my first investor. Out of anyone else, my grandfather, who's no longer here, was just a blue-collar worker in Queens, New York, decided, I'm going to invest in my grandson. And I shot a scene in the movie at his church in Harlem.
Filmmaker Matty Rich, and you can follow the rest of Rich's story in future episodes of Studio 5. And tonight, actress Nancy Stafford joins us with a new romantic comedy in theaters just in time for Valentine's Day. Actors Jim Carrey, Tika Sumpter, and Ben Schwartz give us our first look at Sonic the Hedgehog. And we have a powerful tribute to Black History Month from the National Park Service. Again, that's Studio 5. tonight, 9:30 Eastern, right here on the CBN News Channel. Up next, a look at the new Netflix documentary that highlights the inspiring work of a Christian pharmacist in New Orleans.
If you want to be an attorney with a passion for serving people and for excellence, Regent University needs to be high on your list.
Regent's award-winning law school doesn't just create lawyers. We create leaders, judges, prosecutors and defense lawyers, civil litigators, and leaders in government. Ready to become a purpose-driven, practice-ready lawyer? To start your rewarding career, complete the online application, submit your transcripts, and take the law school admissions test by July.
Nutrition, exercise, essential oils, weight loss, and more. It's Healthy Living with Lori Johnson.
Talk about what's in this.
Join CBN health reporter Lori Johnson to get the latest information from today's top health experts.
This is fantastic.
Find out what you need to know to live a healthier life. Watch Healthy Living, Tuesday night at 9:30.
Woohoo! Hi, Superbook fans. Here's something else you'll love. It's the new Superbook Bible app. It's packed with games, activities, and Superbook episodes that you can watch for free. Oh no! There's trivia, a fun daily devotional, and answers to your Bible questions. Plus, an easy-to-understand Bible the whole family will enjoy. You can even create your own Superbook character. Ta-da! Whoa!
Millsburg Falls man. Come.
Sorry, pardon me. Sorry, excuse me. Ouch!
Are you getting this?
Earn super points to win daily prizes too, and so much more. Time to get back to my adventures. See you soon. It's the new Superbook Bible app. Free downloads on iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon.
And finally, a Christian pharmacist is being highlighted in a new Netflix documentary. The 4-episode Netflix docuseries shares the story of Dan Schneider. Schneider worked to shut down a fraudulent doctor who was selling prescriptions for cash to thousands in his community. The operation was described as a pill mill, where doctors opened medical clinics to sell prescriptions for OxyContin, Soma, and Xanax. Schneider's story begins with the death of his own son and continues with his growing concerns when he began to read or hear in the news about how people that he was filling prescriptions for were dying of overdoses. The Pharmacist was released last week and is available to stream now. That's on Netflix. Well, that's going to do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. Remember, you can find more of our news programs on the CBN News Channel anytime or online with cbnnews.com. Also, tell us what you think about the stories you've seen today. Just email us at newswatch@cbn.com or talk to us on social media. We sure hope you'll join us next time. Until then, from all of us here, have a great day and God bless you.